Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Area Sales Manager Greg Davidson talks about crop progress, ultra-early wheat varieties, and harvesting results in his area. We discuss the wheat treatment as well as our ultra-early wheat varieties. Ben discusses fungicide applications on hail-damaged crops.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today, we have a special guest, Greg Davidson, besides our regulars, Turk and Ben. Now, Ben, I'll let you lead the discussion today.
Yeah, so I would like to talk with Greg. We have some ultra early wheat lines coming off and some of our medium early wheat lines coming off. Let's talk about crop progress, corn and soybeans first, and then we can go into what we're hearing out of the wheat yields. So Greg, tell us a little bit about where you cover and what things look like around your area.
So I just cover, right there across from St. Louis, Southwest Illinois. And our crop progress looking a whole lot better than it did. May, we didn't have a very good month. April, it was really shoddy on trying to get anything out there early. But as of right now, we're 100% done with corn. I'd say we're probably 80 to 85% done with first crop beans. And we've had some replant. We've had a lot of cold, wet rains in the middle of May that we're just trying to clean up now. And we got more or less some wheat starting to come off this week.
Good. So talk just a little bit about what varieties are planted in your area and what guys have had success with, and give us a glimpse into what the yields look like.
So we've started, a couple of my dealers, we started cutting some KD 15, and more or less we're seeing pretty decent yields off of it. It's an ultra early variety, and she's holding pretty strong on the test weight. We're having some 62, 63, 64 pound test weight.
Farmers gotta love that when they're getting heavy test weight, good quality.
All I know is they love the price, they love the wheat, but boy, they just don't like the diesel fuel hauling it away.
I know, I never thought of that. It would cost you more, wouldn't it, if you got high yields?
Have never heard that one before, complaining about diesel fuel.
There's always a downside to everything.
But I got one guy starting in some Maddie. He hasn't gave me a detail yet, but he says it's probably just as good or better than the Katie.
So give us a little insight. What kind of yields are we talking?
Oh, we're looking anywhere, Joe, between 80 to 105 bushels as of right now that I know off the top of my head.
And they got it off, and they're getting ready to double crop beans?
Yep, we got a lot of Nashvilles and a lot of Atlantas getting ready to get slammed into the ground here in the next week or so as it slowly starts coming off.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, with those kind of yields and those kind of prices, how does a customer of ours get to those kind of yields? What do you think influenced this year? What are you suggesting to growers? Starting from the beginning, what populations are you planting at? How do you get to those 100 bushel yield goals?
So starting off in the fall, as soon as you get your corn beans off, or milo, because we do grow some milo down there, go in there, get your ground prepared. Some guys are kind of no-till, where they just take a vertical tillage tool and just go one pass across to kind of open that ground, loosen that top up. On our ultra earlies, we're looking, the planting just a little heavier, up to that 1.7. On our longer season wheats, we're looking up that 1.5 to 1.6
million seeds per acre, right?
Correct, Joe. And we more or less from there's some guys put finesse on early, which is grass herbicide for wheat. And then there's some guys that'll do a half rate of Harmony early and a half rate late. Some guys put a starter on, put their P&K on in the fall. I recommend putting some type of DAP down or a Mez down to get that wheat a good start. More or less, and we come into February, March, and we start side dressing our wheat with liquid 28 or 32% and throw some ammonium thiosulfate in there, so you get that sulfur aspect out there.
How many pounds of sulfur are you pushing for these guys? I guess for nitrogen as well.
Everybody's different. It all depends on what everybody wants to put into the crop, and we all know what you put in is what you're going to get out.
Yep.
So it's just so variable what everybody wants to do, because we still have a lot of guys putting dry urea and treating it with agritane or some type of nitrogen stabilizer coating, or you got Instinct going in with the solution. It's so variable because some guys are still the old school that, 80, 90 bushel wheat's good enough, and you got these guys that are pushing for 100, 125 to 150 bushels, and we've seen it. It's just your management. That's the biggest thing. Come back through, put your other pass of Harmony on. I always recommend an insecticide, no matter what. When temperatures start getting warm, you start seeing some aphids start showing up, and we want to make sure we get them cleaned up.
So explain what Harmony is. Some folks may not have heard of that.
So Harmony is a broadleaf herbicide that is created by Dow DuPont, which is Corteva now, and that is for removing your garlic heavily out of your fields, because you get docked when you haul your wheat off if you have garlic bulbs in the truckloads.
Okay, because we don't have that problem in the north. It's primarily south. So I'm sure somebody listening said, Harmony, what, is that a fungicide or what it is? But that's good to know.
Yeah, and then Feki's 10.5. That's right there flowering. You come in there, you spray Prosaro or Miravis Ace, and that's your fungicide protection from head scab. Even though that the gene is already in most of our wheat varieties, it's still good to have a real good protection. And especially if you have a cool, wet spring, you're going to want that.
About 85% of the nutrients that goes into the head comes from the flag leaf, the topmost leaf, and then of course your head. If you can protect the flag leaf and the head from diseases, you'll typically raise a good crop. It's almost like pollination with corn. If you get through pollination, you're going to have a corn crop, and protect the flag leaf, protect the head, you're going to have a wheat crop.
So your customers are talking about the ultra earlies and the advantage of ultra earlies of getting that bean crop planted a week earlier or a week and a half earlier, and they're definitely seeing the benefits of that, aren't they?
Yep.
in their soybean yields?
Yeah, we're seeing where these guys now with these ultra earlies getting the double crop beans in, Turk, we're seeing that we can almost make it just as much what we do for first crop beans. And that's amazing. I mean, that's something that we haven't seen in a long time, because, guys would usually get 30, 40 bushel an acre off double crop, and we're getting some guys that are saying, hey, I'm getting 50, 60 bushel an acre off double crop. And it's just unheard of. But that's the key to using the ultra varieties, that we can sit there and maximize what we can on sunlight for their timing and get a good bean crop.
That might be almost as good as raising corn.
Just about.
Wheat and...
Well, you take your slightly lighter soils and maximize the gross dollars, similar to corn, on your very, very best bottom ground or soil. So it makes sense. There's another reason why you want ultra earlies, and that is because as the days get longer, we get to the longest day of the year. Once we hit the longest day of the year, it typically turns hot and dry. Now, maybe it's a week early this year, but you got moisture out there to get that double crop up. So the earlier you can do it in June, the more moisture you have, and the later you do it, the less moisture you have. So, because in double crop is getting a soybean out of the ground, that's step one. And if you can get it out of the ground, you're going to raise some soybeans.
Yep. And I think Greg hit on two very important soybean varieties that fit a good portion of our St. Louis and South market, maybe even a little bit further north than that, but you're double cropping with an Atlanta, which is a 4.5 STS. That's going to work really well with your finesse sprayed acres, because there's sulfonylurea tolerance, and the Nashville for those acres that don't have finesse put on them. Both of those beans, talk about the architecture, I guess, both of those beans. Why do you pick those beans other than the SU tolerance and the late maturity? Because, well, I guess hit on both of those, the maturity and the
So the Atlantas, the reason why we use the Atlantas is, well, number one, for the STS, for the finesse, like you just said. Number two, it's a tall plant, so we're going to get it out of that wheat stubble. And more or less, that plant is a bushier type plant. Now, when we switch to the Nashville, it's going to be a little bit later, by 2 days really. It's a tall plant, has really good agronomic features to it. and it's even a little bushier actually than the Atlanta. And for planting later, I think we maximize the sunlight a little bit better, and I think that's why they have a little bit more top end yield.
What population are you running those beans?
We're running about 180 to 190,000, depending on the conditions. You know, if we can get in now and get the weed off, and we can follow the combine with the planter, some of these guys are backing down to about 175 to 170 just to more or less cut their seed cost a little bit. But my recommendation to everybody is about 180, 185 on treated seed.
Yeah, you're in there. You're in there so much earlier. It's different. We're not in the July time frame where that 200 number starts to pop
That's right.
up. Yeah. It's what, June 16th.
Yep.
June 15th.
You don't have to plant it slick. Yeah. So, do you have any farmers using their corn, soybean planters, 15-inch rows, planting wheat down in your area?
We used to, but a lot of them went back to using drills.
Okay. I know up north, we believe that with the ultra earlies and with using a grain drying bin, take the wheat off at 18, we think the double crop line could go as far north as Interstate 80 with the ultra earlies, taking them off wetter, 18, throwing it in a bin, putting air on it, then coming back and no-tilling soybeans in, and it's possible. I mean, we're seeing more locally on our latitude than we've ever had double crop, and it's been working the last couple of years.
Without having to buy a bunch of different equipment.
Right.
Just using equipment that you have.
Right.
There are also growers that are having a fair bit of success with spreading over the top in your area and using mulch style. Maybe I'm using the wrong word there, but what?
Either use a harrow or a mulcher and just slightly disturb the ground and get that seed covered.
Yeah, that is definitely a workable plan, but if you go by the experts, they like to see it drilled at 1.5 inches to protect that crown for winter survival. But we've seen a lot of success doing that system too. So, I mean, I always say never argue with success, but there is an advantage to using the corn planter or the soybean planter in 15-inch rows or using a drill, but hey, it works too.
The earlier that you're planting in the season, the less important the depth is, getting it out of the ground, because your depth is what anchors that seed for winter survival. I mean, that's really what you're looking for, is that how big of a root system that you have to get anchored. And that's really the earlier, if you're getting in fairly early, you can get by a little shallower with that system. But if you're getting a little bit, if you're pushing your envelope on the late side, then I definitely want it in deeper.
I agree with you, Turk. I mean, that totally makes sense, and it is important to plant wheat early. It is very much like corn. In other words, the yield potential, if you plant it at close to the fly-free date, and with our seed treatment, we put the extra load of imidacloprid, commonly called gaucho, on our seed. So we're going to protect the farmer who does even want to push it a week early. I mean, I think you can go, Ben, you said maybe even 10 days early from the fly-free date, because our insecticide will control, particularly in the north. And then you're going to get much better root development, all those good things that you talked about. And then, if you got cattle, hey, graze it, that makes good fall pasture then too.
So anything else you'd like to add on the wheat side of thing, Greg?
No. If you guys are looking for any wheat, we got plenty growing, and we got good yields here.
Well, just based on what you're saying, our supply probably went up 20% more than what our minimum we projected. So we're going to be a very reliable wheat supplier this fall. And everything's looking good in our production. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, knocking on wood, that we can get it out before any major rains on it.
Yep. So you may not have had any hail in your area. Have you had any hail?
No, not recently. We just get flooded.
I was out on a couple hail replant calls this week, and one of the things we've talked about on Cup of Joe in weeks prior when Lynn was on with us, one of the things that we didn't mention that popped up this week was a fungicide application. Hail, soybeans are more tolerant to hail at a much younger stage. I don't worry about the bruising quite as fast when those beans are only an inch or two tall before they got hailed on. So I don't worry about the bruising as much in a 2-inch tall soybean as I do a 18-inch tall, a 12-foot tall soybean plant when it comes to 12-inch tall soybean plant when it comes to replanting that field. But a decent practice to think about is if you're going to leave that stand, getting a fungicide, a cheaper fungicide, something with either a strobe or a triazole, just to try to protect what is there, to make sure there's no infection points coming in. So be thinking about that if you're looking at hailed on soybeans that have an acceptable stand. That might be something to protect the genetic potential of those soybean plants that are there. So hail is hard. I'd almost rather deal with crusting and total wipeouts because it's rolling the dice.
It's almost like frost to me. I mean, you get such variability out there.
Yep. Hail replants are hard. So
They're very hard.
That's what I had for the week.
Okay. Well, I heard Lynn did a really nice job last week. You know, I watched it, and the episode looked like it went all well. So, but I got back, so we make sure we continue to call it Cup of Joe. Lunch with Lynn. That sounds pretty good. Maybe in the future, but right now, anyhow, I got a couple. And Greg, I don't know if you knew that, but I joined a band here not too long ago.
News to me, Joe.
Yeah. I thought a lot of people didn't know I had a musical talent, but one of the unique things about this band is we only play dog whistles. And we perform at tons of gigs, but you've probably never heard of us. Maybe we better get Lynn back. All right, one more. My dad used to say, when one door closes, another one opens. You've heard that about life. Well, he was a great man, but he was an awful cabinet maker.
I'll give you that one. That was okay.
Okay. Well, anyhow, thanks again for watching this week. Stay cool. Stay hydrated. It's going to be a hot one. We sincerely appreciate your business. Hope you and your family are safe. We'll see you next week.